Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are rolling on with Champ Week. We're going to be breaking down the Friday, March 14th slate of college basketball. DraftKings has already delivered us two slates here on this Friday. We've got an early slate that starts at noon Eastern time and a main slate that starts at night. We currently do have the salaries and the games for the early slate, so we're going to break that one down in full for you here on this one. Tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in or out of your DFS lineups in every single game, as well as kind of talk about some statistical edges that you could use if you want to, place player props or bets on those games. And then, we're going to kind of take it where we're at and for the night slate, see what we've got so far, talk about some, interesting teams, interesting games, and maybe some DVP matchups that you can look to exploit as well for DFS. But just know that night slate probably won't be made in full by the time we get to it here in this episode. Now, remember, if you've not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of college basketball season, because we're going to have a lot of content coming your way next week for the NCAA tournament. It is absolutely one of my favorite weeks of the year, and I'm super excited for it. In fact, before we start this podcast, I kind of just want to, I had to make sure my microphone was on. I kind of just want to, just for a second, wax poetic about this week, right? Because you guys that have been around the channel for a long time, you guys know that I do college football and college basketball content, right? And I love them both, but it's a different kind of love, because college basketball, to me, this month of college basketball is unlike anything in sports. College football does a great job of making every Saturday feel like it matters. Every Saturday is a raucous environment in every stadium in the country, and every game feels like it has some significance, whether it's a rivalry, whether it's for, positioning for the playoff or a bowl game or something. In college football, every random Saturday feels like it matters. Well, the downside of college football is, let's be honest, not every team has a chance. Teams aren't made equal in college football. There's just different body types that you're looking at, from a Georgia to a UL Monroe. Like there's just not equity, right? Basketball is different. And in basketball, everybody has a shot. And what makes conference tournament week so special is that you're seeing every team in the nation give it their absolute best shot to try to make their dream come true. Because for a lot of these guys, their dream is just to play in the NCAA tournament. For some of these guys, their dream is to win the NCAA tournament. Some of these guys, their dream is to become a legendary March hero that we talk about forever and ever and ever, even though they go on to be an accountant in a few years. Here's looking at you, Jack Golke. So I absolutely love this month. I absolutely love this week. And to me, there's no better drama on television right now than whatever conference tournament games are on your TV. And I absolutely love it. And we're going to get to see here this weekend some more lifelong dreams come true, some more tickets get punched to dance, and also heartbreak, because there's going to be some teams that are on the wrong side of it. There's going to be some teams that miss the NCAA tournament. There's going to be some teams that come up just short of winning that conference tournament. But that's what makes this sport so great, is that the difference between winning and losing is so narrow, but that the outcome is so wide in terms of lifelong dream or lifelong disappointment. So that's why I love Conference Championship Week. Let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so this early slate is a nice little 6-game slate on DraftKings. I got to say, I feel like this is kind of like an appropriately sized slate. You're starting to get some of these conference tournaments that are winding down. The ACC and the Big 12 are only going to have games at night, but we've still got day action in the Big 10, the SEC, and the American Athletic, and so that's kind of what this slate is taken from. And I kind of like the size of this slate. I think 6 games is a pretty perfect size. There's going to be some guys that develop as chalk. There's going to be some sneaky plays out there. There's going to be strategies that'll work, strategies that won't work. Like, I think this is a pretty solid slate to end kind of the whole run of the early only slates we've been getting this week, right? So game number 1, we have got action in the Big 10. Oregon is taking on Michigan State. Ken Pom has this one as 74-69 in favor of the Spartans. That is a game total of 143 points. This is a rematch of a game that was played earlier in the season where Michigan State won 86-74. Now, one thing we've complained about Michigan State all season long, and we're going to continue to complain about it, is how balanced they are with their minutes distribution. They play like 9 guys, 20 minutes or more. In that game, there was no Jeremy Fears for the Spartans, and so Michigan State ended up playing Jace Richardson, Jaden Akins, Trey Hallman, and Jackson Kohler over 30 minutes, which allowed them to have solid fantasy outings because they were seeing those boosted minutes. On the Oregon side, nothing super notable, but I do think there are ways you can target this. From a statistical perspective, Oregon ranks 164th in tempo and 36th in defensive efficiency. Michigan State ranks 153rd in tempo and 5th in defensive efficiency. So on the Oregon side, everything starts with the big fella, Nate Biddle. He's really good. I talked about him yesterday. I still think that he's a little bit overinflated in price tag at $9,600. Today he absolutely filled up the stat sheet and still only put up 36 DraftKings points. Against Michigan State in the previous meeting, he only had 14. He only played 20 minutes. Dealt with foul trouble in that game, was not very good. Wide range of outcomes, but I don't think it's very likely that he's going to break the slate at a salary of $9,600. He's probably going to be a pass for me here on this one, if I'm being totally honest. Now, where I do want to target this Oregon team, it's been super frustrating the whole season, but just their guard rotation, right? Like they play a lot of guards. They kind of play a lot of balanced minutes. But in the Big Ten tournament today against Indiana, it really showed who they were going to lean on from the guard spot. And most of that was Jackson Shellstad. He took 13 shots, had six of them were threes, put up 26 DraftKings points today against Indiana. In that previous meeting against Michigan State, he played 34 minutes, took 13 shots, put up 31 DraftKings points. Michigan State is a team that they will pack it in and force you to shoot threes. Jackson Shellstad is Oregon's most prolific shooter in terms of attempts and makes. So I think this is a pretty good spot for him, and I really like the fact that he is playing absolute maximum minutes to start this Big Ten tournament. Keyshawn Bartholomew is a guy all season long that we've complained hasn't really gotten max minutes. Today against Indiana, he played 30. Against Michigan State in the previous matchup, he played 33. He was very poor in that game, only 8 DraftKings points, but I'll kind of buy into Bartholomew at these minute totals that he's going to get, but $6,500 is a lot to pay for him, and he just I've been complaining all season long that he's been at a great price tag, but his minutes have been awful. And now it's like reverse. Now the minutes are going up, and so is the price going up. It's like DraftKings caught wind of it. TJ Mamba is another guy that is going to play a ton of minutes in this one. 33 minutes against Indiana, 26 DraftKings points. To me, he's a little more palatable because this is a guy who can fill up the stat sheet, good peripheral rates. But 6,300 is still a little more than I would like to be paying for him. The last guy that I will mention is Kwame Evans Jr. He's going to play about half the game, but he's been super effective over the last month of the season. He's totally outplaying Brandon Angel, and he's playing more than him now. And pretty much before the Indiana game today, where he only had 12 DraftKings points, every game before that of his last 6 were 19 DraftKings points or higher. So that's a pretty good streak going. I think he's a viable value play at 5,500. Now on the Michigan State side, like I said, they've been super frustrating all season long because they're even minutes distribution, right? But Jace Richardson is starting to play nearly every minute of every game. And so that would make him absolutely in play. He's a freshman. He's absolutely developing into one of their best offensive players. I think his stock is going to continue to rise. Is 7,800 a little more than I would want to pay for him? Yeah, but he's hit 4x value in 2 of his last 5. And I do think that his stock is trending in the right direction, and I'm willing to play him at 7,800. Jackson Kohler going up against Nate Biddle, I don't think is the best matchup for him. Kohler's also another guy that tends to never play max minutes. I think he's a really hard sell at $7,000. He's probably a pass for me. Jaden Akins is a guy who's right now taking a ton of shots. And I got to say, if you're going to take this many shots, Jaden Akins, 14 in 4 of the last 5 games, I'm kind of willing to play you on DraftKings for $6,400. Because if you take 14 shots, odds are you're going to hit a good amount of them. So I don't mind it. The real interesting part for this Michigan State team, though, is the minutes distribution between Trey Holloman and Jeremy Fears. Right now, Holloman is playing more minutes. Holloman is more effective. And unfortunately, they're both kind of priced out to the part where I want to play them, because if they are splitting minutes, then that is going to cap their ceiling. At the forward spot for this Michigan State team, after Kohler, it's really just an uninspiring group. Like, they're not bad real-life players, but Izzo just plays them all such an even amount because they're all so balanced that, I just really don't have a whole lot of interest in him in a DraftKings perspective. And so that's going to kind of continue to be my opinion unless we start to see some clear usage patterns develop in this conference tournament that we can buy on later on in the conference tournament. Now, next up, game number 2 is Mississippi taking on Auburn. KenPom has this one projected as 82-73 in favor of the Auburn Tigers. That is a total of 155 points, which is the highest on the slate. Actually, let me double check that. Yes, it is the highest on the slate. There's another one coming up that's going to be pretty juicy too. Anyway, Auburn and Ole Miss played twice this season. Auburn swept the season series. They won 92-82 and 106-76. Auburn scored over 90 points in both those games, just FYI. Ole Miss ranks 128th in tempo, 29th in defensive efficiency. They're a very poor rebounding team. Auburn is 136th in tempo and 13th in defensive efficiency. And Auburn fouls a lot. So Ole Miss, the guys on the team that draw fouls, your drivers to the basket, like Dre Davis, like Jalen Murray, might not be a bad, or Malik Dia as well, might not be a bad spot for him because Auburn will foul you. Now, one good piece of information for Ole Miss is we kind of complained about their deep rotation on yesterday's pod, but mentioned, which we kind of talked about with Michigan State, but mentioned that in the conference tournament, you might see usage patterns and minute patterns change. Well, for Ole Miss, they certainly did. They played a really condensed rotation on Thursday against Arkansas, and I'm hoping that that's going to continue. What happened in the Arkansas game was Matthew Morrell, Jalen Murray, and Malik Dia all played 32 minutes or more. Sean Padula dealt with foul trouble, so he did not play as much. But what you saw also was the Padula foul trouble elevated Davis and Barnes and Brakefield. They were kind of the ancillary pieces. They all played between 20 and 25 minutes. But I do think Padula would play max minutes if he was not dealing with foul trouble. And I think that this is a decent bounce back spot for him. Auburn's a team that's going to push the pace. Padula is a peripheral stat guy. And so we like peripheral stat guys in pace up matchups. In the previous Auburn games, he had 44 and 27. It's pretty good. So I'm willing to buy the bounce back on Sean Padula. But I really like Malik Dia. Basically, all season long, we've complained about how he has to achieve production in modest minute totals. Well, against Arkansas, he played 32 minutes, and his size is going to be needed against Auburn's front court. If he can stay out of foul trouble, and I hope he does, then he absolutely could smash the slate again. He was a big part of my FanDuel exposure. He was a part of my FanDuel core on the Thursday slate. I had him a little bit in DraftKings as well. I'm probably going to go back to him here in this one because the price isn't adjusted for the level of minutes that he played in this game. After those two, Jalen Murray has my interest at 4,900. Like I said, he played max minutes, put up 29 DraftKings points. I'm willing to buy into that. A guy that's going to be on the field a ton or on the court a ton and is only $4,900. I'm willing to play him. A little bit of a Freudian slip there thinking about football. Next up, the Auburn side. So Auburn, it's important to note in their last game against Alabama, don't take all that as gospel because it was an overtime game and Chad Baker-Mazara got ejected for just an absolutely bonehead play. So you did see guys with boosted minute totals. But the one biggest thing that I wanted to confirm in that Alabama game we got, which was Janai Broome hurt? Because the previous two games were bad. He had been grimacing. The body language was bad. It was not looking great for Janai Broome. And then the Alabama game happens and he has 65 DraftKings points. Yeah, Broome's back. He's fine. Against Ole Miss in the previous meetings, he had 44 and 46 DraftKings points. It feels like he's pretty likely to get to that again. He is 11K, which is the most expensive player on the slate, but he is the premier pay-up option on the slate. And I do think there is enough value to go around that you can fit him into your lineups pretty comfortably. I'm going to be doing probably the same approach that I did with Janai Broome on the Alabama slate, is like literally splitting my lineups in half Broome, half not Broome. Whatever the ownership is, I can live with it either way if I'm 50-50 because I know that I'm going to give myself some chances if he nukes the slate, which can happen. And I know I'm going to give myself some chances if he bombs, which also can happen at a salary of $11,000. So that's just my personal approach to it. You might see it differently. You might want to go all in. You might want to full fade. That's your prerogative. Like I said, though, with a guy like him, I kind of see it a lot like Zach Edey last year, where he was at such an insane salary, but he still had the upside to just absolutely nuke a slate and make him the guy that you had to have, that I felt like I had to put him in a lineup every single slate. And really, I wish I played Edey more than I did. I think my personal feelings towards Zach Edey's foul drawing and lack of defensive movement impacted how much I played him. I'm not going to let that happen with Janai Broome. I'm going to be playing a 50-50 Broome here on this slate. After him, I really do like Miles Kelly. So when you think about Ole Miss teams, Chris Beard's the coach. Got to know him pretty well when he was at Texas, not personally, but like his coaching style. And he runs what's called the no-middle defense. The no-middle defense is designed to not let guards get penetration to the hoop and force three-point shots to be taken because they're just generally not as efficient. Miles Kelly is Auburn's best three-point shooter. In the two games against Ole Miss, one of them he was 3 for 5 from 3, put up 22 DraftKings points. The other one was 3 for 6 from 3, put up 21 DraftKings points. It's not the DraftKings points we necessarily want, but he's playing a ton of minutes right now. He's their best shooter. I don't mind getting to him at 6,900. Tahad Pettiford kind of concerns me at 5,600 because he was playing all of Denver Jones's minutes for 2 games, and then he played all of Chad Baker-Mazara's minutes in the Bama game. So you're seeing 3 great DraftKings performances, but they're at the expense of another player in the rotation. I'm kind of leery of that happening again now that everybody is back for this game. And then also I do want to talk about the Denver Jones because he did play 38 minutes in that Bama game. $4,600 for a guy that is the starting point guard of one of the best teams in the country and probably the best offense in the country. Yeah, I think you can play Denver Jones and feel pretty comfortable with him at $4,600. Next up, we got Wichita State taking on Memphis, battle in the American Athletic Conference. I do believe this I do believe this tournament's somewhere in the DFW area. I don't know whose arena it's in, but I know it's somewhere in the DFW area. Nice little conference tournament the Americans got going on there. Ken Palm has this one as 79-69 in favor of Memphis. It is a total of 148 points. Now, these two teams split the season series, and it could not be a bigger contrast of games. Memphis won the first game at their place 61-53. Wichita won on their home court 84-79 in overtime. So wide range of outcomes in this game in terms of not only who's going to win, but in terms of the total points as well. From a statistical perspective, Wichita ranks 116th in tempo and 123rd in defensive efficiency. They are a supremely poor three-point shooting team, but they're a really good rebounding team on both sides of the ball. Memphis ranks 38th in tempo, 42nd in defensive efficiency. They give up a ton of turnovers, and they give up a ton of offensive rebounds. So it stands to reason that if you heard that and think, well, Memphis gives up offensive rebounds, who on Wichita gets offensive rebounds? The answer is Corey Washington. Now, we've seen Wichita on multiple slates this season because for whatever reason, DraftKings loves putting Wichita on main slates. Don't get me started on DraftKings' game selection on some of the Thursday and Sunday slates this year. But Corey Washington, I think he's genuinely overpriced. But he does have slate breaking upside, and he is an elite offensive rebound player. In the most recent game against Memphis, he had 39 DraftKings points because he had 15 boards. In the game they played today against South Florida, Washington played 32 minutes, it's pretty much above his average. He had 9 boards, none of which were offensive, and still put up 21 DraftKings points, led the team in usage offensively, led the team in shot attempts by quite a substantial margin. As much as I like to say the price tag is bad, for the matchup that he's seeing with Memphis and for the usage in minutes that he played against South Florida, that's kind of a fair price tag if you ignore the name, the team name, the position, all that. Like this is a pretty good statistical profile from that UCF game and considering that opponent for Corey Washington. So I'm kind of buying at $8,400. He's probably going to make my player pool, and I don't think anybody's going to play him. Quincy Ballard's another guy who can pick up offensive rebounds. He is a more traditional center. In the previous game against Memphis, he had 36 DraftKings points. The one before that, he had 25. So 2 pretty good performances. And Ballard is another guy, kind of like with Malik Dia, that we were complaining over the course of the season that he never played max minutes. Well, look at his minute totals recently. He's playing a lot of minutes now. And if you have a good fantasy point per minute player whose minutes go up, that tends to mean his fantasy points are going to go up also. So Quincy Ballard, not a bad look at 7,200. Xavier Bell is still the engine that makes this offense go at 6,700. He played less minutes against USF today. A lot of that was because he wasn't playing well at all. He had 4 fouls, he had 4 turnovers, but he's in a little bit of a slump. But I could see him busting out of it. Like, he's been really good all season long. Now, his 2 games against Memphis had been garbage, but I could see him busting out of it. I just wish when I was doing my research for this slate, I was prepared to come on here and say Xavier Bell at $5,200 was going to be a great value play. But he's not $5,200. He's $6,700. So I'm probably not going to be clicking him for that reason. But just know I am kind of buying the bounce back here. Now, Beverly and Cortez and Hill are all going to be rotational guards. Hill was their best player before he got hurt, hasn't really returned to full strength. Beverly's kind of a 3-and-D wing that comes off the bench. Not interested in him at $6,200, just my personal opinion. Bijan Cortez is kind of this hot and cold guard that sometimes he gives you really good games, sometimes he doesn't. If you want to chase the one that he had today, knock yourself out. It's probably not for me, though. The one guy I will play, though, is Ronnie DeGray. This is a starting power forward on a team that's not bad, but he plays a lot of minutes. He gets some boards, gets you some blocks and steals, scores a little bit every now and then, $4,100. On a day where I want to make Janai Broom fit in half my lineups, yeah, I'm going to be firing up some Ronnie DeGray here on this slate. Now, on the Memphis side, they run through their 2 guards, PJ Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter. But the problem is, and I've been saying this numerous times about Memphis as well, they're just too expensive that they don't have slate breaking upside for their price tag. For Haggerty, you want 38 fantasy points just to get 4x value. And that is a value that he has hit once in his last 8 games and only twice in his last 9, 3 times in his last 11. Like, that's just not sustainable asking him to do that. He's not a big time peripheral stat guy like some other forwards are that allow him to routinely break the slate for his price tag, like a Janai Broom or like a JT Toppin or somebody like that, right? Haggerty's not that. So I struggle to play him at $9,400. What I hope is that nobody's going to play him on this slate. He's going to come in cheaper next slate, and I can play him at a discounted price tag. That's kind of what I'm hoping is going to happen for Haggerty. Tyrese Hunter is their other next best guard. He kind of sits in the shadow of Tyrese Hunter, but every now and then he has these big games, one of which was against Wichita in that overtime game. He had 36 DraftKings points. I don't mind going to him because I think he's a little more reasonable at his price tag, and the usage is still pretty darn solid. Dane Danger is a transfer from Illinois. He's another guy. I'm going to say this a few times throughout the episode that he was a great per-minute player at Illinois, was a great per-minute player to start the season at Memphis, and then they moved him into the starting lineup, and now he's playing like 30 minutes a game. That makes him a great play, especially against Wichita, a team that's going to push the pace, a team that's not that great on defense. I like Danger here in this one, $8,900. Last game against Wichita, he was not good. Only 9 fantasy points. The previous game, 14. So maybe that's not a good sign, but I kind of like the profile here with Danger. Now, Nick Jourdain is the starting power forward. He is also playing a ton of minutes, but he is way overpriced at this point, in my opinion. Probably not going to be getting to him. But if you're somebody who does like to play the leverage game, if you think that Dane Danger is going to be highly owned, play Nick Jourdain because everyone's going to play Danger. No one's going to play Jourdain. Colby Rogers is the last guy I'll mention. This is a revenge game for Rogers. He did play at Wichita. He was Wichita's best player last year. Didn't fare so well in their arena. Only 14 DraftKings points. Only 10 DraftKings points when they played in Memphis. But this is a guy who can elevate and be the best offensive player for this Memphis team at any given moment. He randomly pops for games like he did for 29 DraftKings points against UAB. He's going to be in my player pool because every now and then he pops. And I play GPPs, and I want guys that can pop, and probably nobody's going to play him at that salary of $5,000. All right. 3 games left on the early slate. Next up is Wisconsin taking on UCLA. KenPom has this one projected to be 72-70 in favor of Wisconsin. These two teams played earlier this season, and UCLA won 85-83, 168 points scored in that one. In that game, both John Blackwell and John Tanji had solid games, solid outings for Wisconsin. And then UCLA was their bench players that won it for them. Ade Mara and Sebastian Mack both had huge games off the bench. From a statistical perspective, Wisconsin ranks 153rd in tempo, 34th in defensive efficiency. They do not generate a lot of blocks or steals. They really just like to make your shot as tough on you as possible and then rebound the basketball after you shoot it. For UCLA, they're pretty slow. They're ranked 303rd in tempo, 15th in defensive efficiency. They force a lot of turnovers, but when Ade Mara is not in the game, more on him in a second, they have really poor two-point defense, especially at the rim. So he's going to be a major factor here in this one because somebody's going to have to stop. Whoops, I don't know how I did that. Somebody's going to have to stop Tanji and Blackwell on Wisconsin. Now, I have had a poor track record this season, much like with Julian Reese and Derek Queen of Maryland, of picking which one goes off for these two guys, right? Today against Northwestern, I had more Blackwell than Tanji. Tanji has 33 DraftKings points, and Blackwell did not have that many. He had 14. But they were both good in the previous game against UCLA. They both really got to the rim well. Blackwell had 35 DraftKings points in that game. Tanji had 35 DraftKings points in that game. I never advocate for playing both these guys together because it's statistically more likely when you look at their game logs that just one of them goes off. But I think that there's a pretty good chance that at least one of them goes off here. So they're both going to make my player pool. Which one's it going to be? I don't know. I never know. If I had to guess, I would say the recent usage is pointing towards Blackwell being a better play. But the fact that he did go 3 for 10 from the field and 1 for 6 from 3 today is not inspiring. But the usage seems to be pointing to Blackwell. Now, I will call out Nolan Winter as well. He was questionable heading into the day, played 26 minutes, put up 32 DraftKings points. Was great for Wisconsin in that game against Northwestern. I kind of don't mind the idea of chasing that because I kind of think that he continues to play high minute totals in this Big Ten tournament with Wisconsin needing to pick up wins to improve their NCAA tournament seeding. So I don't mind him at $5,300. And then, oh, by the way, Max Klesmit was back today. He played 23 minutes, put up 17 DraftKings points. It's not great, but he's only 4,300 now. And this is a guy that was routinely 5 and 6K when the season was going through. So I don't mind getting to him at 4,300 here in this spot. Now, on the UCLA side, their highest priced DraftKings player is Tyler Bilodeau. He's their starting center. He's not bad. I think he's a little overpriced at 7,300 though, if I'm being totally honest. Previous game against Wisconsin, 21 DraftKings points. Like, you need him to get 29 to feel pretty good about playing him, and he hasn't done that in his last 6 games. So not super ecstatic about Bilodeau. What I am ecstatic about is the emergence of Ade Mara. So Ade Mara is an international, I believe he's Spanish, don't quote me on that, 7-footer who comes off the bench and just dunks and blocks shots and makes a lot of impact plays and does a lot. But yet Mick Cronin in his grumpy ways only plays him 14 minutes a game. Every game that Ade Mara has played more than 20 minutes this season, he's put up more than 20 DraftKings points. And in the last 2 games, he played 16 minutes against Northwestern, 32 DraftKings points, completely changed that game in the second half. Against USC, it was a blowout. He only played 14 minutes, put up 22 DraftKings points. That's what he does. I think this UCLA team is better when he's in the game. I'm hoping that Mick Cronin realizes that. As stubborn as Mick Cronin can be. And I hope that Ade Mara plays 20 minutes, and I hope that he breaks the slate. He has the upside to do so. He's going to be in my player pool. I'm going to be playing me some Ade Mara just because I am a believer in him long term. Now, for the UCLA guards, it's really tricky. Kobe Johnson is just a peripheral stat guy. And I've said this about him before. I don't like playing peripheral stat guys at upper prices. Like I want you to have scoring upside, because the way you break the slate is by scoring and putting up peripheral stats. There needs to be a happy medium. It just can't be both. In the previous game against Wisconsin, he fouled out in 28 minutes and only put up 6.75 DraftKings points. That ain't going to cut it. Probably not going to make my player pool. Eric Daly has been really good for them lately. 40 DraftKings points against USC. I kind of like him at $5,800. It got a wide range of outcomes, but it's within that range of outcomes to put up 40 DraftKings points. So I don't mind him at $5,800. Sky Clark, they've turned him into just a catch and shoot player. Yes, the last 2 games have been great, but like, I don't really feel like I want to chase that. But here's the thing. Over the course of this season, he has just been a catch and shoot player, right? In the last 2 games, he's had 7 and 6 assists. So did Mick Cronin completely change his role in the last 2 games? It's a possibility, man. I watched that Northwestern game. I didn't think that his role would change that significantly, but maybe it has. Maybe he's the distributor now. And if he is, $5,300 is a reasonable price tag to pay. But I'm saying over the course of the entire season, they had turned this guy into just a catch and shoot player. I'm willing to take some chances on it, because what if the role has changed and he's back to 30 DraftKings points and gets you 6x value? The chance. Sebastian Mack is their slashing guard off the bench. I like Mack. I like his game. He's not playing enough minutes to produce at the DraftKings salary. Dylan Andrews has been their distributing point guard. Hadn't been doing all that much though. So really, Sky Clark's probably the only UCLA guard I'm going to get to. And it's probably not going to be a whole lot, because I'm not for certain that that's going to continue to be his role. Next up, we have one of the more appetizing game totals on the slate. FAU taking on Tulane. KenPom has this one as 77-74 in favor of Florida Atlantic. This is a rematch of a game that was played earlier this season where Tulane won 80-65. In that game, Greg Glenn of Tulane almost had a triple-double, 7 points, 8 rebounds, 11 assists. Wow, he got the most difficult one for a forward to get and didn't get the 2 easy ones. That's kind of disappointing for him. I'm sure he'd love to have that triple-double. Anyway, from a statistical perspective, FAU ranks 83rd in tempo, 182nd in defensive efficiency. They're a poor rebounding team. They're a poor three-point defense. Tulane ranks 213th in tempo, 171st in defensive efficiency. They are a poor rebounding team, and they give up a high assist rate. So Ron Hunter is the coach at Tulane. You remember that Ron Hunter, the one that fell out of his chair when RJ hit the 3 against Baylor? Yeah, he's coaching Tulane now. He's like one of the few coaches in college basketball that will throw a zone out there, which lends itself to exactly the 2 statistical trends that I just mentioned: poor rebounding, high assist rate. So if he does throw a zone against against FAU, just know you got some offensive boards that can happen. You got some high assisting that can happen. Now, on the FAU side, they've been on a DraftKings main slate seemingly every time, more than Wichita State. Like FAU, they're on. It seemed like they were on every Thursday since the calendar turned to 2025. And one of the most frustrating things about them is they're kind of like Michigan State. They play all these guys balanced minutes. Well, now that we're into the postseason, they've switched up their starting lineup. They've switched up their rotations. And there's some guys that we can play on this team now, starting with Baba Miller. He's their all-around best player. He is going to play all of the minutes. He is going to take a lot of shots. He has double-double upside. He's a great shot blocker because he's like 7 feet tall, but he moves like a guard. And he's just an all-around solid play. Is $8,000 a little more than I would like to pay for him? Yes, but will he still make my player pool, considering this is a great game environment and considering that his usage and minutes are trending in the right direction? Yes. Trey Carroll is probably a guy that won't make my player pool. I have talked about how good he's been all season long. And he's been great all season long. He's a little energizer bunny at the center position that just gets all these offensive boards, tips it to himself, does a lot of the little things that winning basketball teams want, right? But for some reason, he's kind of fallen out of favor. His minutes totals have gone down. He's out of the starting lineup. He's only had one good game in the last 5. He's still $6,900. I can't pay for that. What they've done is they moved Matas Vokatitis, nailed it, into the starting lineup. He's a big 7-foot freshman that has really developed over the course of the season, is playing his best basketball right now. And in the last 4 games, Vokatitis has played 24 minutes or more in 3 of them. The only one that he did not was when he fouled out in 12 minutes against ECU, but he's still put up over 21 DraftKings points in all 4 of them. He is way too cheap at $5,000. If he continues to start, he's probably going to put up over 20 DraftKings points again. And to me, that makes him a great cash game play and tournament play, because let's be honest, looking at this slate, it'd be real easy for me to just click Janai Broom and click Vokatitis and feel pretty good that I'm going to get at least 4x value out of those 2 players. So I think Vokatitis is a great play at 5K. Now, the other guy that I will mention is Leland Walker. So we'd mentioned how they had been super balanced with who they've played at guard, right? Well, Walker has now played like more minutes than all of them recently. And much like with Baba Miller, the minutes and the usage trending upward. Price tag very high for what I would consider his profile to be. So am I willing to play him? Yes, he's going to make the pool, but I would much rather be paying 6K for him than 6.5. Caleb Glenn's another guy I'll talk about. He also moved into the starting lineup with Vokatitis. Kai Tandy was the other guy that moved to the bench, but he's not really putting up some like big statistical games. So I'm kind of ignoring him and looking really for this FAU team, looking just at Miller, Walker, and Vokatitis as my 3 guys. Ken Evans is coming off the bench. He's not terrible, but is not doing a whole lot either. And then Nicolo Moretti is also a guy that comes off the bench, supremely high usage rate when he's in there. I think he's a pretty solid punt play. He's been over 14 DraftKings points in 3 straight games, $3,700 salary. We'll take that. He doesn't play the biggest minute totals, but he's really active when he's out there. And so I really do think that he's viable as a punt play at $3,700. Now, on the Tulane side, this is a team that we saw once on the DraftKings main slate. I believe it was last week, but don't quote me on that. It was one of those goofy Thursday night slates, I believe. Yes, we've seen them once. Rowan Brumbaugh is a Texas and Georgetown transfer who is their best player, their highest usage player. He's probably going to lead them in shots. He can really put up some peripheral stats. And with this game having a total of 151 points, I kind of like the idea of playing a guy like Rowan Brumbaugh here in this game. Much like with the FAU guys, is 9,200 a little more than I want to pay for him? Yeah, but I still think I'm willing to pay, especially in a lineup that's going to game stack this game. Caleb Banks is honestly kind of disappointing when you look at his game log and you look at his usage rates and you look at his price tag. I think he's just a straight up overpriced on DraftKings' part. I'm probably not going to be getting to him. Cam Williams is another guy that I actually think I will get to, much like on the Brumbaugh situation. Now, Williams has a super wide range of outcomes. He's been super boom or bust lately, but he's a peripheral stat guy, and this is a game that could really be good for peripheral stats. And Cam Williams, he generally plays a ton of minutes. Against ECU, I don't know why he played so few minutes, but he generally plays the entire game. So I think $6,700 is not a bad look for him. But I think the best play on the Tulane side is the guy that we mentioned earlier, Greg Glenn. He's very consistently over 4x value. You know, he's $6,100, so you want at least 25 DraftKings points. Well, he's been 24 or higher in his last 5. That's pretty solid. His peripheral rates are really, really good. I would prefer him to Cam Williams, especially at cost. But I think if you're not getting to Glenn, I think Williams and Brumbaugh make a lot of sense. But I think a lot of people are going to be playing Glenn, and I'm going to be one of those people. Now, last game of the day, we've got Texas taking on Tennessee in the SEC tournament. And look, now I'm biased. I'm repping my Texas gear. I wore this today, and they won. I don't see how this Texas team didn't earn a ticket to the NCAA tournament today. And I don't know how Rodney Terry didn't save his job today. Like being totally honest here, is Rodney Terry a top 10 coach in college basketball? No. Is he a top 20 coach in college basketball? Probably no again. But you're a school like Texas. A lot of your NIL money is going to football. You don't want to pay Steve Sarkisian what you're paying him and a basketball coach what it would take to get one of the top coaches in the country. You don't have the funds for that and to be good in both with NIL. And these guys, these Texas guys, are going out there and they are fighting hard for their coach, and they are fighting hard to try to earn a bid into the NCAA tournament. And in back-to-back days, they beat Mississippi State and Texas A&M, teams that I had been told were, or I'm sorry, Vanderbilt and Texas A&M, teams that I had been told were much better than them. And so 2 upset wins where a lot of the other bubble teams are just losing. I think this Texas team should be in the field. I think Rodney Terry should continue to be the coach. I think those 2 things are probably mutually what's the word here? Mutually inclusive, where they need to make the tournament for Rodney Terry to keep his job. But that's just one Texas fan's viewpoint, in my opinion. But I'm really looking forward to this game. Texas and Tennessee, the first time they played this season was a great one. KenPom has this one projected to be 72-63 in favor of Tennessee. When they played in Austin earlier this season, it was much closer. Tennessee won 74-70, but that doesn't tell the full story. Texas really controlled that game until about the last 8 minutes when Tennessee came back and kind of took the lead. Trey Johnson had 26 points in that game. They really didn't have an answer for him defensively, which is surprising because Tennessee is the number one defensive efficiency team in the country. They are 346th in tempo. That is not a matchup that you want to go against because they're slow and they are really good defensively. That's not good. Texas, we've talked about them already. They're 171st in tempo. They rank 49th in defensive efficiency, and they give out a low assist rate. Now, on this Texas side, what you've seen a lot over the course of this week is a lot of guys' prices are going down, down, down. That's what we like to see, right? Trey Johnson's down in the 8K range now. And in the first game against Tennessee, they couldn't stop him. They couldn't guard him. He had 34 DraftKings points in that game, did not give you a whole lot in the peripherals, was below his averages in pretty much every category, and still put up 34 DraftKings points. So I'm kind of buying Trey Johnson here. I don't know why they didn't give him the ball more against Texas A&M, which is a crazy statement considering he had 21 shots. But if you watch that game in overtime, it was a lot of Tremont Mark dribbling in isolation, and Trey Johnson just being used to stand in a corner. Yeah, if they want to win this one, they're going to need Trey Johnson to be really good. And so I think he's a very high upside GPP type of play at $8,600. Arthur Kaluma, as we mentioned on yesterday's pod, I kind of just play him every time he's healthy because he plays all of the minutes. He's a high usage player. He's got double upside. He'll get you peripheral stats as well. I don't think this is the best matchup for him in the world, but I do think that he's a guy that you can count on to get pretty much 4X's salary. Caden Jedrick is playing well, but I think $6,000 is a little much to ask against this Tennessee team for how many minutes he's being asked to play. Tremont Mark is playing okay this SEC tournament. The DraftKings totals have been really, really good. He's been over 24 in 4 straight, 32 or more in 2 of them. He is being a high usage player. He's had the ball in his hands a ton. That's something that they could continue to go with in this game. It wouldn't shock me if they did. I would be, personally, from my perspective, I would be going more with Trey Johnson than Tremont Mark, but I could see them going back to a lot of Tremont Mark, and I think that he's a very solid play at $5,900. And then Jordan Pope is another guy that they could go to offensively to get some buckets. Like he had 26 DraftKings points in the game against Texas A&M. He had 8 boards, some of which were huge down the stretch of that game. I absolutely will be going to him at $5,000. He's playing a ton of minutes, and his role is more than his salary is right now. The last guy that I'm going to talk about, though, is Kendall Weaver, who's just a straight misprice at $3,200. We talked about him on last night's pod. He played 23 minutes against A&M. He fouled out. He probably would have played more because they were using him to guard Wade Taylor, and in that game, he put up 19 DraftKings points. I think he is a smash play at $3,200. And like we said earlier, if you're looking to get the Janai Broom on this slate, Kendall Weaver at $3,200 makes a lot work. Now, on the Tennessee side, in that Texas game, no real one guy stood out, but what you're seeing over the course of the season is Zakai Ziegler, with the exception of the anomaly of the South Carolina game in their last regular season game, has been great down the stretch of the season, putting up a ton of peripheral stats, taking more shots offensively, and we know that Texas guards are not all that great. They really struggled to contain Wade Taylor today. They couldn't guard him without fouling, basically. Wade Taylor lived at the free throw line today. And so I really think that Ziegler is a solid play at $8,600. Much along the same lines, I think Lanier is decent at $7,700. Lanier had the huge game against South Carolina. Lanier is a pretty consistent scorer when he has his big DraftKings games or when the peripheral stats go up. You never really know when that's going to happen. That's kind of hard to predict. It's kind of the inverse of the Kobe Johnson profile that we talked about earlier. I don't mind Lanier at $7,700, but I think Ziegler is objectively going to score more fantasy points, but he's also priced higher at $8,600. Now, Igor Milicic is $6,000, and he's a Charlotte transfer. I'm a Charlotte alma mater. I love his game. I love what he does. And to me, he's a guy that, he could break a slate at $6,000 because it does not take a lot for him to block a few shots, get a few boards, and he's actually a really good passer from the forward spot. In the previous game against Texas, he only had 17 DraftKings points because he dealt with foul trouble. The only thing that worries me about Milicic is during the middle portion of the season, he was really effective at the 5 from a fantasy perspective, right? He was putting up a lot of fantasy points when they would play him at the center. Those minutes have all but disappeared lately. But also in this game, he's going to be guarding Arthur Kaluma at the 4 spot, which actually is not a bad place to be, like if you want to rack up fantasy points. So I don't think that this is a bad spot for Milicic. I do think that he has a ton of upside here, and I don't think that a whole lot of people are going to play him. Felix Opara is their rim protecting big. I don't think rim protecting bigs are necessarily the guys you want to go against for Texas. But his profile is looking really good lately. He's playing more and more minutes. He's putting up more and more fantasy points, but I don't think that this is the best spot for him individually. Jemai Meshack is probably a guy that's going to play a ton of minutes in this game because he's their best perimeter defender, and he's going to be needed to guard either Tremont Mark or Trey Johnson. And I think that even though he's a guy that doesn't take a lot of shots, he could get you a ton of peripheral stats. He's only $4,200. I think he's certainly worth a look in your lineups at that price tag. All right, that is going to do it for the early slate. If you made it all this way, thank you guys for making it this way. If the video helped you out, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that, and I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate it. And then also, if you do want more information from me, because we're about to do an abbreviated night slate here, so if you do want more from me, follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I tweet out all updates for the show. I'm also more than happy to answer any questions if you reach out to me on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description for that. It's a community of DFS players of all different sports. The college basketball chat in there has been jumping lately. We have a good time, but we also talk lineup strategy, injuries, starting lineups. Like there's just all kinds of things we talk about in there all day long. If you're looking for a community to be a part of, to talk strategy and lineups together, or just sweat it out together, it's just an absolute blast, and I cannot recommend it enough. And then if you want to know who actually makes my college basketball DFS lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I profile all of my core plays as well as why they are my core plays on that Patreon. So that is where you can get that information. All right, now let's go ahead and talk night slate. So for the night slate, there's one problem we're running into, right? And that is the fact that we don't know all the games yet. So we can't do a full breakdown of the night slate. But what we can do is we can kind of talk about what we know about some of these games that we know are going to take place. And we can do our best to kind of, prognosticate what's going to end up happening, right? So first thing that stood out to me was they did choose to start it at 6:30. Fan of that because you're going to capture the Big East and the Big Ten games on this slate. So that first game that's going to be taking place on this slate is going to be Marquette and St. John's. KenPom has St. John's projected to win 73-69. These two teams just met literally last weekend. Marquette, it was at Marquette's place. St. John's won 86-84 in overtime. It was 75-75 at the end of regulation, and it was a huge Kadari Richmond game. He had a triple-double in that game. It was also a huge Cam Jones game. He had 32 points, 9 boards, 7 assists in that game. So it'll be interesting if those two teams go back to the same strategy they had in that game. The one wrinkle would be that Davon Smith for St. John's would be back healthy. He did not play in that last game against Marquette, but he only played 12 minutes against Butler. So it seems to reason that he's not going to have a huge role just yet. And so it could be more Kadari time for St. John's. And we know, because we talked about it for seemingly 4 seasons now, actually 3. This is our 3rd season of doing this. The bigs against Marquette is a great matchup. And so Zuby Ejiofor could absolutely be a good play coming in against St. John's. And then I also like David Joplin going against St. John's as power forward spot. So to me, that's a game where there's a lot of different options you could go with. They're all expensive, though. There's not a whole lot of value plays to be had in that game. Next game is Illinois taking on Maryland. This is going to be one of the juiciest games of the slate. Illinois is playing some good basketball as of late. KenPom has it projected to be 80-79. That is a 159-point total, 80-79 in favor of Maryland. The two teams played earlier this season back in January. Maryland won 91-70. It was a huge game for both of Maryland's bigs. Julian Reese had 27 and 17. Derek Queen had 25, 6, and 4. Now, granted, that was without Ivasic for Illinois. I believe he had the mono then. So not exactly the rim protection that Illinois was used to, and Maryland made him pay for it, right? But I do think that Maryland's bigs, this is a good matchup for both of them here in this one. If you're looking on the Illinois side, look at the box score, what they did to Iowa today. Ivasic was great. Trey White was great. Will Riley was great. Kylan Boswell was great. But the most interesting thing to me was the fact that Kylan Boswell is kind of taking over the lead guard role from Kasparis Jakachonis. That is super important because it means that Boswell's ceiling as a fantasy producer is going to be way up. Jakachonis is going to be way down. I'm probably going to be playing Boswell over Jakachonis as long as that trend continues, as long as it's going. Now, next up, we've got North Carolina taking on Duke. And look, this is the biggest injury news of the DraftKings season is going to be whether or not Cooper Flagg plays in this game. Currently, as it stands, KenPom has Duke as 14-point favorites, 84-70. But without Cooper Flagg, I don't think that Duke should be 14-point favorites, right? So the most interesting thing here is going to be, does Cooper Flagg end up playing? And what does the price tags look like for the rest of the Duke guys? Con Knippel, depending on price, is a great play because of what he did against Georgia Tech today. He very quickly acclimated to the lead dog role in that offense, played very well, was one of the highest overall scores on the early slate today on Thursday. If Knippel is under 8K, he's close to a lock button play for me, in my opinion. I also really like Kaman Malawach, Tyrese Proctor, Isaiah Evans. They're all great options if Flagg is out because they're going to be playing with increased roles, increased minutes, increased usage, which should mean increased fantasy points. And oh, by the way, they're going up against North Carolina, a team that really likes to push the tempo. In fact, ranks 33rd in the nation in tempo. And if you're on the North Carolina side, they've really leaned on the two bigs, Withers and Lubin, so far to this point. Now, granted, Duke is an entirely different matchup than the two teams that they played, but those two guys have been really good. If they come in reasonably priced, I'm probably going to go back to those two guys. And as far as I am concerned, I am not going to be playing any Carolina guard not named RJ Davis because they're just not playing enough minutes right now. They're really opting to play big lineups. All right, next up, we've got Florida in a game. I believe that Florida is going to take on Missouri. Florida is going to have a significant size advantage down low against Missouri. Both those teams really like to push the tempo. One thing I'm going to be interesting to see, I haven't analyzed the Missouri box score yet from their game tonight against, who did they play tonight? They played Mississippi State tonight. I haven't had a chance to analyze the box score from that game yet, but Missouri's rotations is going to be something I'm super intrigued to follow. Is do they condense the rotations? Are there guards that they play more than others? Are there bigs that they play more than others? Those would kind of be the guys that I would want to lean on here from a DraftKings perspective. And looking at it now, Tamar Bates and Tony Perkins both played over 30 minutes. Missouri never plays guys over 30 minutes. So I would be inclined to lean on those two guys, especially if they continue to come in pretty cheap. And then we also saw Josh Gray only play 21 minutes as a big, but he put up 12 boards in those 21 minutes. That's pretty significant. On the Missouri side, my main interest is going to be in Bates and Perkins. On the Florida side, my interest is going to be in their bigs because I will think they will have a significant size advantage over Missouri, and that will be a pretty good game to stack because of how much those two teams like to get up and down. BYU Houston, I'm just going to put a big old X through that game. It's projected Houston 73-66. On KenPom, I just generally don't like playing Houston guys, and I generally don't like playing Houston opponents. It's just me. Creighton did punch their ticket to the next round today, barely beating DePaul in overtime. Depending on the matchup, if they have a team that's either going to push the tempo or going to be really small, Kalkbrenner and Ashworth could have my interest. We also saw the Fedora Zugic breakout game here against DePaul. Maybe I could see myself going back to Zugic and chasing it, but I don't know. I've always believed in Zugic's talent. I played him a lot this season, but did not play him tonight. Michigan, I cannot remember from the Big Ten bracket who they're going to be taking on. They are the 3, so they'll play the winner of the 6-11. So they're going to play Purdue, probably, or USC. If Michigan plays Purdue, Purdue's very weak defending the interior. Vlad Golden would be a guy that I would certainly be looking at. And I think that would be a pretty stackable game as well. Michigan's not exactly playing great defense right now. They're turning the ball over a lot. Braden Smith could very easily have a very big game on the Purdue side. We've talked about Purdue at length before. I generally don't play the Purdue guys outside of Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. That's just how I see it. Louisville had the miracle ending to beat Stanford tonight on Thursday. They will play the winner of Clemson and SMU. I would expect it to be Clemson, which means I would expect this to be a fairly ugly game. One thing we did see with Louisville today, though, Maxime Reynaud for Stanford was pretty good. They're not the greatest interior defense. And so if it is Clemson, Locken and Shefflin could absolutely be lock and load on from a DFS perspective in that game. I really do think that Louisville's interior defense is not all that great. If we do look at Louisville today, they beat Stanford 75-73. Terrence Edwards, Chucky Hepburn, Javon Hadley, Noah Waterman, James Scott, they all played 30 minutes or more. Rain Smith did not play. I think that puts all 5 of those guys squarely in play from a DraftKings perspective because of the fact that they're playing all the minutes. When the 2 teams played earlier this season, Louisville beat Clemson 74-64. Nobody from Clemson really stood out with a big game. That was a big Javon Hadley game for Louisville, though. So maybe that would be something to chase. But we'll see how the price tags come in, because I'll be honest, the price tags on some of the Clemson guys and some of the SMU guys on the Thursday slates were kind of laughable. So whichever team comes in, it'll be interesting to see what their prices come in at and we might be able to just kind of ride the wave with whatever guys we keep with. Alabama is going to play the winner of Oklahoma, Kentucky. That's going to be the premier game to stack on the slate because Alabama ranks first in the nation in tempo. Kentucky and Oklahoma both get up and down as well. The Alabama big situation is quite interesting to me, because they had really been rotating a lot of guys over the course of the season. But over the last few games, really the last week, it had been a lot of Nelson and Big Cliff. If those 2 guys continue to play all the minutes, they're going to continue to smash from a DraftKings perspective. And I really do like both of them in all formats, as long as they're reasonably priced, assuming that Nate Oates doesn't switch up his rotation on us. Texas Tech is going to play, I believe, the Kansas-Arizona winner. And in either event, I kind of like JT Toppin. I kind of just like JT Toppin on every slate. But it'll be interesting to see who that opponent comes in as, because I genuinely don't have a lean. I don't think that that'll be a premier game to stack, no matter who it ends up being, though. But all right, y'all, that was kind of a quick little 10-minute breakdown of the night slate. I wish we could give a little bit more, but it's kind of hard without salaries and without some of the full games for some of them. So hopefully we did what we could to give you guys the information you need to build some winning DraftKings lineups for the night slate, and hopefully the full breakdown of the main slate gives you everything you need to have a profitable main slate. But anyway, make sure you are subscribed with us. That way you can be with us through the rest of the NCAA tournament, which we're just so excited for. We're going to have a ton of content coming your way. College basketball best ball is starting on Underdog as well. We've already done 1 strategy episode and 1 live stream for that. I want to do another live stream. So if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll be able to join in with us and talk about the Underdog drafts, talk about the bracket and all that stuff. Well, what I'm kind of tentatively planning for the rest of the week is a show tomorrow night to talk about the Saturday slate, a show on Saturday night to talk about the Sunday slate, and then Sunday night selection Sunday. I'm going to be doing my golf show Sunday night, but what I want to do is I want to do the Underdog live stream after the golf show, so that way we have a bracket. We hop in the live chat, talk about the bracket. It'd be a lot easier to kind of optimize some of those drafts once we have the bracket. So I do want to do that, and if you're subscribed to the channel, you will know when all of those happen. So, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. We're closing in on 1,000. And with it being March Madness, this is a huge time of year for us. So if you know anybody who's interested in college basketball, spread the word. Tell them about this channel. Tell them about, playing college basketball DFS. It is not a solved game. It's not a game that is run by the sim bros and the optimizer bros, like a lot of other DFS is. And so, with it being a big time of year for us, help us out, spread the word. And it is much appreciated when you guys do that. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and we really want to get there before the end of March Madness. But all right, y'all, that is going to do it here for this slate. Best of luck to you guys on the Friday slate. Hopefully, like me, y'all are looking forward to another full day of watching college basketball. Like I said, I love this time of year. I love college basketball. I love this week, and I really, really love next week. So hopefully you guys have a good time with the Friday slate. Hopefully you guys have a profitable Friday slate. Best of luck to you guys on both the early and the main slates on Friday. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time. And I got to do it because they're playing tomorrow. Hook 'em. See you guys next time.